as we've been tracking all this movement, we've kind of had our pulse on all these schools across the country and take a look at kind of our opinion of the top classes in the portal. And yes, there's still a couple days that the portal's open, and there's going to be more entries here from these playoff teams. And then there's going to be the spring as well, where there's going to be, I believe, another exodus of players here after they see how things play out during spring practice. But based on what we've seen so far, we're going to give you guys kind of our opinion of these top 5 classes. And we'll start with not your typical blue blood here. Well, do you want to go 1 to 5 or 5 to 1?
Let's go 5 to 1.
Okay, let's go 5 to 1. So I, hopefully I don't give anything away with that, but we will start with number 5 on our list, but number 1 in the country right now, the Oregon Ducks, who they've been pretty selective here, D, when it comes to the portal, but at the end of the day, they are getting real quality.
Yeah, when you're the number 1 team, you can be selective. You don't need to fill a ton of spots. They are recruiting at such a high level, but you're adding premium talent, premium body types, guys that fit in with what you want to do and have reasons for being in the portal. So you're looking at their class. You got obviously, Dylan Thieneman, the top safety in the portal, maybe the most productive defensive player in the portal. Not quite Caleb Downs last year, but maybe this year's version of that is someone that every team in the country wanted this player. Ball skills, tackling, toughness. He's immediately going to step right in as the star of that back end and as a leader. So that to me that's obviously a no-brainer pickup for Oregon. He's rated as a 90 transfer on 247, which is interesting because I think watching his production in the Big Ten and seeing the other schools that are after him obviously ends up at Oregon. To me, he's more of a top 5 player in the portal. I'm not sure I agree with that ranking, but then you're adding body types. Bear Alexander, kind of a mercurial defensive tackle, bounced around, but very talented. Dan Lanning knows him from recruiting. He comes in there. Isaiah World, great body type, 6'8", 309 from Nevada. We did a show on his commitment. Really excited about what he brings to the table. Jamari Johnson, 6'5", 265, tight end from Louisville, someone we've seen up close and personal. Fluid, athletic, but also big. I think there's more that he can do than he did at Louisville, so excited to see him. Another big offensive tackle from lower-level school, Texas State, Alex Harkey, and then Theron Johnson from Northwestern. So nice, small, strong class. Of these guys, the guy I'm most intrigued by is Isaiah World, as far as I want to see what he can do on the field, because body type-wise, he looks the part. He's played a lot of games, and I think with this coaching and strength and conditioning, he could be a factor for Oregon.
So moving along here, another program that typically does very well in the portal themselves, and that is Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin is always been someone who's been aggressive when it comes to transfers, and it's been no different this cycle. As I'm pulling up their page here, but ton of pickups for them. Luke Haas from Arkansas is one that comes to mind. Caleb Odom from Alabama. But they've got a long list here as I pull it up. 15 new names coming in.
Yeah, this is how they build their program in terms of just, they recruit, but the portal is their bread and butter, and it's a volume game with Ole Miss in the portal. Like you mentioned, 15 players, some coming from HBCUs, some coming from other SEC programs. So it's a mix of what they're trying to do. Pass catcher, especially big physical pass catcher, to me is the big takeaway when I look at this class. You look at Dejon Stribling from Oklahoma State, bigger guy. Luke Haas, the tight end, who we really, really like, fast, explosive, definitely a receiving tight end from Arkansas. Was one of the best receiving tight ends to come on the scene in a while. Injuries have sort of stalled his development, but he has all SEC type potential. And then you mentioned Caleb Odom, who a lot of people look at like a tight end. He views himself as a receiver, 6'5", almost 230 from Alabama, originally from Carrollton, Georgia. Fluid, athletic, great wingspan. So if you're bringing in, a new quarterback to replace Jackson Dart, particularly as Austin Simmons, a younger player, you want guys that are going to be contested catch guys, 50-50 guys that are going to make life easier for the young quarterback. And I think that's the biggest thing that Ole Miss accomplished with this group.
Yeah, it took 3 guys from Arkansas. So not only making themselves stronger, but weakening a foe in the process there. So been a great start for them. Again, Lane Kiffin, he's always going to be aggressive in terms of acquiring talent, and he really doesn't care if there's some marks against them or in terms of lack of production. Like, he's going to bet on upside.
Yeah, you get 63 points against Arkansas. I wonder if that made people make people at Arkansas more likely to jump in the portal too.
That can't hurt. That can't hurt. So we'll stay in the SEC here for our third ranked class in the transfer portal, and that's going to be Brian Kelly and LSU. And the thing about this group is, yes, you do have some guys who have some potential still, but you're bringing in a handful of guys who have been very, very productive at other spots. And the headliner, I think, recently here was Patrick Payton from Florida State, one of the top available players in the portal. Really down season for him this last year, so he's going to have a lot to prove this year. In terms of draft stock, I think that motivation could definitely be helpful. Mansour Delane, really solid corner from Virginia Tech, is another one who came over recently, and I think that's a great pickup for them. Jack Pyburn from Florida, one of their leading tacklers this season, who really developed nicely this season, brings some physicality to the edge spot there. So you look at this LSU class, what sticks out to you?
I think what you're really doing is adding. They do a lot of things, right? They're adding some toughness with Braylon Moore, Jack Pyburn. I like that. But the main feature that, again, there's a lot of players in this portal class, 13. But the theme that sticks out is there's some high upside players here. Kind of, I don't want to say boom or bust, but definitely guys that can really hit big and guys that have some significant drawbacks that allow you to get them, them not being in the NFL. You mentioned Patrick Payton, one of the best pass rushers in the ACC from day one, was the rookie of the year in the ACC. But the run defense, the consistency, some of that stuff, some of the effort, the physicality, that soured some Florida State fans on him. Of course, he was still a very desired player in the portal, a 95 portal ranking from 247, but there were inconsistencies. If you can get this guy revved up to where he's getting more physical, better against the run, Blake Baker can utilize him in ways that he's getting to the passer. You got Harold Perkins and other guys. Of course, Pyburn on the other side, more of a physical player on the edge. If this guy can get going, you can have another one of these LSU pass rushers like, Chasen or Arden Key, guys like that. He kind of fits into that mold when you look at the length, the fluidity, and the explosiveness, and the proven production as a sack guy. Nick Anderson, big, super talented young receiver from Oklahoma. Injuries and Oklahoma situation last year. He decides I'm moving on, goes to LSU. He's got a ton of upside to be one of the best receivers in the SEC based on what he showed as a freshman. And then Barian Brown wants to show he's more of a consistent receiver than what he showed in Kentucky. Very inconsistent quarterback situation, much better situation with Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, but he's one of the best kick returners in America and also has that explosive speed. So all of those guys to me bring a high upside that in the portal, sometimes you're trying to get sure things, right, or plug holes. Those three, they bring in production, but really what they, to me, bring is the ability to be, first round, second round type players if they really blow up at LSU.
And then we haven't even mentioned Michael Van Buren at the quarterback spot, who really was a guy at Mississippi State this year who was thrust into that role after injury and was a tough season for the Bulldogs this year in terms of win losses. But I think he showed enough that if you're an LSU fan, you're still disappointed about losing Bryce Underwood. But you say, man, this guy's actually played SEC football already and looked pretty decent at that. So can you develop him behind Nussmeier and he takes over the reins the year after that? We'll see if that's the case. But I think that has to be a pretty solid plan.
Yeah, and there's a question here from Kane's Cat. Would you rather have Bryce Underwood or the portal class they have? It's hard to say without seeing Bryce Underwood at the college level. Obviously, we've seen him in high school. I think there's a lot of pressure on Kelly to win now, which Underwood's not necessarily going to help with. So these guys are going to help LSU potentially turn it around. You have a great quarterback right now in Garrett Nussmeier, so you at least have a year of high quarterback play. You mentioned Michael Van Buren, Pete. I think that was a very smart move when you lose a Bryce Underwood to get a young talent in there who's played in the SEC and made plays against teams like Georgia, still has some upside. Maybe not Bryce Underwood dimensions and talent, but he does have his own abilities and has been proven in the SEC and has, of course, youth on his side. So, listen, in a perfect world, you have Bryce Underwood. He's first pick of the draft, All-American, the face of your program, and someone that is a legend at your school. But they really do need to turn it around fast. And I think this portal class allows them to turn it around fast, maybe recruit some more young quarterbacks in the future based on your success here. And then Van Buren's your guy, then that's another solution to a problem. This year, you got Nussmeier, and you don't have to worry about that position.
Without a doubt. And I think, look, Ole Miss's class could end up being the number 1 or 2 class when it's all said and done, because there's a lot of high upside.
LSU,
excuse me. A lot of high upside guys there, because they've shown some stuff, but like Patrick Payton, if you can get a full consistent year out of him, is a top 3 to 5 pass rusher potentially in the country. So it's hard to just find those guys falling off of trees. So we'll stay here in the SEC, and we'll go to Auburn, another program, another coach there who needs to kind of win this next year, especially with what they've done in the portal. They've been very aggressive there. Most recently picking up Eric Singleton at the receiver spot, which, I mean, he was the number 1 guy in the portal, extremely dynamic receiver from Georgia Tech, track speed. But at the top of this class, you got to look at Jackson Arnold coming over from Oregon, Ashton Daniels coming over from Stanford, both quarterbacks, right? And both bring something different to the table. But hypothetically, your quarterback issue should be solved. You have Deuce Knight coming in, a freshman as well. If you can't make it work with these guys, Hugh Freeze, then we got some bigger issues.
Yeah, I love how focused this class was as far as, look, we're not trying to build a whole team. We've recruited well at Auburn. They killed in the state of Alabama this year. What they're saying is we are going to focus on 2 specific problems and crank up the talent in those rooms that we just cannot fail, particularly the quarterback position and the wide receiver position, which you already had some very talented young players from last year's recruiting class. So you're Auburn. You say, look, Peyton Thorne, we really didn't produce at the level we needed to at the quarterback position. That held us back. They had a great tailback in Jarquez Hunter, who's now moving on to the NFL. How can we crank this quarterback room up? Well, first of all, you get 3 extremely talented players. Jackson Arnold was a consensus 5-star player, top 10 player coming out. Ashton Daniels has played in the ACC and made plays and has just dual threat ability. And then, of course, Deuce Knight, who we saw in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game, he looked like an absolute alien. I'm surprised they brought in 2 quarterbacks just because this guy, I think, is ready to play at least in packages right away. But what I love about it is all 3 of them, they can run, they can throw. You don't need to change your offense for any of these guys. Plus, you can run them a lot and not worry about them necessarily getting injured because the other guy can fill in that role. So I'd be curious to see how this running game develops. You have Cobb, you have Alston coming back. You're replacing a ton of production with Hunter. How much of a role is the quarterback going to play in the run game? Is it going to be a situation where you say, look, man, we got 3 of these guys. We can almost treat them like running backs and not care about them getting beat up because maybe we rotate at quarterbacks, which is not always popular, but is an option. Or maybe we, let's say Jackson Arnold's the guy, we just can treat him like a running back, a Tim Tebow in terms of volume. And if he gets hurt, boom, Ashton Daniels could step in and maybe Deuce Knight's ready to play. So it's going to be interesting to see how the quarterback run particularly sets up here, but you can run the same system for all these guys. And then, of course, wide receiver, Pete, I'll let you talk about it, but that is a loaded room.
Yeah, well, I mean, Singleton to me was that's a huge pickup because of what you can do with him, not only in the passing game, but in the run game with those jet sweeps and just getting him the ball in a variety of different ways. Horatio Fields was a big one as well, big body receiver from Wake Forest who had a really solid season. And look, Wake Forest wasn't a great situation. The quarterback spot with Bachmeier, guy who's experienced but not exactly dynamic, wasn't ideal. So you're looking at a guy here who, again, 6'3", 205, brings that big body element to the table for you at Auburn. or you have Cam Coleman also. So you got some guys to throw the ball to. You hope that you have your quarterback situation figured out. But I think Singleton's like a top 5 receiver in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about, Hugh Freeze obviously not coming from necessarily from Urban Meyer world at University of Florida, but you can see some of these things, right, with the running quarterbacks that can run with power as well as speed. And then a guy like Singleton maybe coming around on jet sweeps, whoever the running back is getting the ball. There's things you can do that are similar to that offense because of the speed of a Singleton and your ability of your quarterbacks to run in between the tackles. Plus, you have enough receivers with Coleman, Fields, and everybody else that you could spread teams out and then kill them inside with the quarterback run. So very, very interesting to see how this offense plays. They were not, a terrible offense in terms of passing the ball. We look at explosiveness stats, but I think this year they're going to be particularly explosive because of that dual threat ability of the quarterbacks and then the receivers' ability, not just to catch the ball, but to make 50, 60, 70-yard touchdowns, even against SEC competition.
And without much further ado, our number 1 class in the transfer portal, our good friends in Lubbock, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, bringing in 17 players at this point. And Coach Joey McGuire has been super aggressive here, coming off an 8-win season. The Matador NIL, considered one of the strongest, most powerful NIL collectives in the country. We've talked about them a few times on the show here. And they've been not only aggressive, it's one thing to be aggressive, but they're landing guys who were very productive at other stops. Just going down this list, man. I mean, Romello Height being one of the headliners, a guy who's on school number 4 now, but a very experienced pass rusher, played at Georgia Tech last season. Lee Hunter, one of the hottest commodities on the market as an interior defensive lineman, coming over from UCF, 6'4", 320. Those guys are, those are big battles to win when you're winning a battle for one of the most sought after interior defensive linemen in the entire transfer portal. Reggie Virgil, a speedster out of Miami, Ohio. Legit big time track speed, 6'4", productive player of Miami of Ohio. Hunter Zambrano, from Illinois State, I believe was the top FCS offensive lineman on the market. Cole Wisniewski at safety, linebacker, kind of a hybrid guy, super productive, interesting player out of North Dakota State, dealt with some injuries this year. But you got to just be really excited if you're a Texas Tech fan at the number of productive players you're bringing here. Terrence Carter, another one from Louisiana, who is a really movable chess piece on the offensive side of the ball, H-back, tight end, receiver. So, man, a lot of new faces, but a lot of guys who you know what you're getting because they've been successful at other stops.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're bringing in, you look at the class and you say these guys are building a whole new team. They must have been, 2-10 or something like that, like a Florida State. But really, when you look at their season, 8 wins, got a chance at 9 wins. You're bringing back your starting quarterback. You have stability at head coach. You brought in 2 really nice coordinators, expensive coordinators. So the pieces are all kind of there. And then you're adding in what is basically a new team, right? You mentioned you went through the positions. You did, cornerback, right? Terrian Grant, very athletic player out of Purdue, former top recruit. Bryce Pollock, another solid recruit who's coming from the SEC level, and it's going to give you some length and some speed. Those guys can cover. The defensive line additions with Height, with Hunter, body types, guys that can get it done. Offensive line. You mentioned Hunter Zambrano. A lot of people think he's the best offensive lineman in the portal. Someone I watch back down here in Broward County who's come a long way, basically very much a late bloomer who's doing a lot of really nice things. Quentin Joyner, man, we saw how explosive he was against USC, making Penn State, a playoff team, one of the fastest defenses in the country, look slow. Howard Sampson, big body from UNC, another offensive lineman. So the balance of this class stands out. Reggie Virgil, I think, at wide receiver is going to be a tremendous add. You mentioned the tight end Terrence Carter from Louisiana. He's a movable chess piece, very good receiver, very, very much receiving first guy. You do lose a lot in Josh Kelly as far as that number 1 receiver who's going to be getting open all the time. Is Virgil going to be more than just a deep threat? Is a guy like Carter going to take some of that target load? That's something to watch. But pretty much this class checks all the boxes for Texas Tech and is the #1 class in the country as of now. Day after Christmas, still work to do. But Texas Tech made a huge, huge move in the Big 12.
Yeah, man. Quality and quantity. You're getting both with this class, man. So Red Raiders fans really excited for next year. And Coach McGuire, man, talk about some serious momentum heading into spring practice and January workouts here.
Absolutely. Excited to see him. Reckham's all over the comments as always. So learning about this giant Texas fan base and some of the institutional advantages that Texas Tech has to potentially make a move to the top of the Big 12.